Hey Elliott, how's it going?
Pretty good, Josh. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. We're just recently on the heels of you doing the Phi 201, throwing you a curveball here. We didn't even practice this, but how did how did that go for you? And did you get any like feedback or anything from the group, like as far as good, bad, indifferent?
No, I think it was all pretty positive. I think it went well. I felt inside baseball, I felt like Alan's sidekick. But Alan was a great pro co-presenter as he also created so much of the content that he made me look good. But yeah, it was a good time.
As a observer, I definitely didn't think you appeared to be a sidekick. It felt pretty equal across both of you. So I think you did a good job, and it was fun to watch you guys go through that and field the questions and comments that were coming in from the group. And it was an amazing turnout again. I think of at least 60 something people there, and it was a full house, and it seemed like everyone was very engaged. And I know there was a lot of really good conversation and probably could have gone on for many hours afterwards, but we got kicked out of the library as per usual.
That's right. Yeah, no, I mean it was a lot of fun and I don't remember what the exact count was, but I know it was mid 60s or somewhere in the 70s. So, yeah, we're getting good turnouts for these informational sessions, which I think is really good. I know that a lot of other Phi chapters do more education or have at least historically, and I think that's kind of been a gap for us. So, we're real good about being social and doing the St. Louis thing and drinking a beer. But yeah, no, good to make sure that people are feeling educated and getting that 1% better where possible.
Yeah, I think so too. And I certainly hope that we continue this trend and maybe sprinkle them in once a quarter or maybe even more often if possible. But I think it seems like, I mean, just with the turnout that we've had compared to the case studies, it seems to be some successful and something that people are looking for.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, turning our attention to the topic today, I wanted to talk to you about a comment that I received from my oldest son, Caleb, a couple of weeks ago. This was right around the time that I celebrated my quitiversary, my 1 year anniversary of leaving the full time W 2 job. And I had mentioned to him that we did a little bit of just celebrating the day, I guess, my wife Lori and I did. And he replied back, "Yeah, it's really great that you did that." And he said something along the lines of, "You beat the system, and especially the way that the economy is heading." And I was kind of taken aback by that a little bit because I felt like, to an extent, there was maybe a bit of an implication that something like that isn't necessarily repeatable in the current environment, or that there was another way that I took it, as well as that maybe I did something that other people don't have the opportunity to do. And so I kind of went back and forth with him just a little bit and just said, I kind of took a little bit of a humble approach and said, I don't really think I beat a system per se, but especially over having a 25-year work career, but I really didn't kind of start my FI journey until my mid 30s, and then didn't even purchase my first rental property until I was 39. I went through a whole bunch of like bad things in my 20s and early 30s. We can link back to my origin story regarding all that stuff, but really didn't start even understanding how to manage money or start saving, let alone investing, until my mid 30s. And lo and behold, like 13, 15 years later, and get to a point where early retirement is a possibility. So it wasn't an overnight success, and I didn't pull any kind of, you know, strings or anything like that to get to this kind of spot. So he just said that he thought that people, it's getting harder and harder for people to retire at traditional retirement age, let alone at all. And for someone that's 25 years old, I just was I felt I haven't talked to him more about it since then, and I'm still trying to kind of collect my thoughts, and we'll get to a point where maybe I'll have be able to have this conversation more in person with him. But I just wanted to kind of bounce that off of you and kind of get your thoughts on something like that as you hear somebody that is really in the early stages of being an adult still and maybe having the opinion that, oh, it's just going to be so hard for me to ever reach that type of milestone. And essentially almost sounds like he's just thinks that, that's not achievable and he's going to work forever.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to go with that. I mean, first, yeah, I mean, it's not uncommon, I think, in probably every generation just feels like, oh, yeah, I have it worse than my parents had it. And it's very doom and gloom. And, nothing will be as good as what it was before. When I think if you look at the data more, you know, remove the anecdotes and look at the actual raw data itself, it's actually that you know, life and just general, progress has advanced every year. So by and large, now is the best time to ever have lived, despite all of the problems that we may have in this exact moment in time, right? Of course, I mean, the benefit of hindsight from you and me know that the most important thing that you have on your side as somebody that's practicing, these five principles or just saving money in general is time on your side. I mean, being 25 is the superpower that you don't even know that you have, right? Is if you can start saving or creating a gap between the money that you make and the money that you save or your expenses, and obviously the gap is the money that you save, and you actually go and invest that money, which was a discussion topic in our 201 class. Is yeah, you can't just go squirrel that away in your bank account. Like that's not how you're going to create that wealth that we do in the FI community. Is you actually need to invest that money. So yeah, I mean, to say that you quote unquote beat the system, I mean, I think what my initial comment to that is, yeah, all you had to do is show up to work 25 years straight and you beat the system. I think a lot of people, obviously, I say that very, very much jokingly. I mean, in that overall, if you live an intentional life, like we talk about in this community, you can get there much faster than even that timeline. And like you said, you found this much later in your career. It wasn't like you've been practicing it for 25 years and you just got there now. Even like I hope to pass on the learnings that I've had onto my children, and they do so much better, faster, whatever than even I did. Caleb, you can do it.
It's funny that you mentioned something about this is the greatest time to be alive. And I've heard that sentiment a few times, and it's always interesting to see the opposing opinion of that, where it's like, oh, well, the boomers had it so great and they had all the pensions and they had all this and that. And, as someone who's getting older and wiser now and kind of remembering back to some of my younger days, I, I mean, my first mortgage, my house was, I think we purchased it for right around 90,000 in the year like 2002, and my interest rate was like 7.5% or something like that. And it was, I don't think the interest rate was too much lower than that, but I was a first time home buyer and we maybe didn't have the greatest credit, so we took a hit there a little bit. But now it's back to that range, and of course probably home prices have outpaced the affordability or the whatever
Yeah.
metric you want to look at as far as income. But I know that's one thing that people look at, or young people look at now, is like, interest rates were like 2% just a couple of years ago and now they're 7%. And how can we get ahead? How can we achieve the American dream and that sort of thing. But in reality, like you and I have talked about with all of the things, I mean, Caleb is living an amazing life. He is traveling all over the country with his girlfriend. They live in a van, they camp, they do all these things to pick up odd jobs or seasonal work. Right now, they're working right outside of Glacier National Park for like the next 6 months. And those are things that weren't even on my radar in my early 20s. And, that all came in part, I would say, because of the internet. Certainly, there was pockets of people that were doing that back in the 90s, whenever I was, or early 2000s when I was Caleb's age. But also at the same time that I was Caleb's age, I was already had two kids and married and all of those things. But yeah, that kind of lifestyle wasn't even on my radar. And I just thought it was go to college, get a degree, go to work, buy a house, buy a car. So we were stuck in our own kind of vision or view of what life should look like for the average person, and didn't even really know that there was the alternatives that so many young people I think are pursuing these days. And speaking about the internet, I think we've talked about this before, but some of the jobs that Caleb has picked up along the way are more like internet based or more gig economy stuff where he's just like, oh, I'm going to do door dashing for 2 or 3 hours and they'll go out and make whatever amount of money. And again, things like that weren't available even to you, I would say, probably in your early to mid 20s. Certainly not for me. And yeah, it's just kind of it's interesting to me how people look at things from a different view, a different perspective, and how it seems like either the economy is bad or things are heading in the wrong direction. But if you take a different look at it, like you mentioned, where we're living in the greatest time ever, it's the future is a lot brighter, I think.
Yeah. No, I mean, sure, like you bring up some of those points of where I would say just traditionally younger people say, yeah, and trust me, my quote unquote generation of millennials, I mean, I think there's a lot of metrics that people like to say, yeah, that millennials have been hit one of the hardest in all of that. You've got I graduated real close to the great financial crisis, so job prospects were terrible. Then, I mean, you've got COVID, you've got all kinds of things like the fact that, yeah, I mean, sure, you can cherry pick statistics to say, yeah, hey, like I bought my first house and I mean, I don't remember the interest rate. It was in the threes, right? And then I bought my second house, probably also still in the threes. COVID happened, I refied, I'm in the twos. But now, yeah, to the point of going from to the twos to the sixes or sevens, like, yeah, of course, it sounds absolutely miserable. And but at the same time, like you look at historical ranges of where rates had been, and like you said, we're right back to kind of the historical average. So sure, you can anchor to any point in time and just be very anecdotal and say, oh, like how I can't justify this crazy change, but you got to look at a wider view than um, a very zoomed in perspective of, oh, this is the last 5 years that I've been looking and look at how it's hockey sticked. So I get it. And to your point about living the life that you want, like you describing Caleb's life today and how different that is from the life that you or I lived, like the prescription really from I felt like our parents' generation was go to college, go get a good job, you know, go buy the car, go buy the house, have family, have kids. Like that was the idea of the quote unquote good American life. Yeah, the thought pattern of living in a van, traversing the country and doing gig work. Yeah, that wasn't even a thing. Like for me, even, with the benefit of hindsight, I would have said that I I probably limited myself in not going and, working abroad or living abroad in college or doing something else where it wasn't, my little microcosm of the world. I know that even when I got my first co-op, so like a summer and a semester that I took off of college, I was trying very, very hard not to be in St. Louis at the time because I lived in St. Louis. I went to school in Rolla, Missouri, all of like an hour and a half away, so you draw a circle of where I've been, and it was very, very narrow. But of course, I got offered a good job opportunity at the time that people would, you know, thinking about. I got offered a job at Anheuser-Busch. That was a very well respected company. And turns out that was the year they got bought out by InBev, right? And my job prospect went from, hey, you've basically landed the job that's going to land you your full-time employment, to you have absolutely no chance of job prospects going forward here, at least in the near term anyway. So I take that tangent to say, yeah, we all have our stories of why things are all doom and gloom, but if you view from a wider perspective, I think it shows a slightly different story.
And even with that setback that you had, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were still striving to continue along that same path. So it was like, okay, I got to get the next full-time job so that I can continue in this direction. Maybe you didn't have all the pieces laid out as far as what, marriage, kids, and family and all that was going to look like at the time, but you were heading in the direction of that as opposed to looking at the opportunity of, hey, I just lost this job, but let's go travel the world and let's take an opportunity for a mini retirement or a sabbatical or whatever other terminology you could have used to take a break, so to speak, at that point in time. And or even just do something completely different. You hear those stories as well where somebody's like, yeah, I was going to be an engineer, and then I decided that, hey, I really liked, I don't know, woodworking or something completely different than that. And I think that is so amazing that people can pivot and do those types of things with the opportunities that are available today and just the different types of opinions and perspectives and stories that people share out on YouTube, social media, whatever, and that you're able to see those kinds of things and open your eyes to the possibilities that the world has. And yeah, it's kind of like when when I talk about how Caleb's living this life, it's in my mind, I think there's a part of me that I'm like, well, at some point he's gonna have to figure out what he wants to do when he grows up. You know what I mean? Like this is the parent in me also sort of anchoring back to like you mentioned, this was the prescription that we were given. So, I don't know if he ever will. He might just become like this might be a long-term lifestyle, that he's working as long as he can get healthcare and make enough money to provide for himself, hopefully save and invest a bit of that. I mean, who's to say when would you ever need to retire from the type of work that you enjoy or the lifestyle that you love? I mean, I don't know if that's something that you can do. Like he's a raft guide on a river outside the park, and I don't know that that's something you can do into your 60s or 70s, but maybe you can, and maybe you're the wisest guy on the river at that point. But
That's
yeah, I
right.
mean, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like I know I've referenced this book a number of times. I mean, Doc G's Taking Stock book. I mean, he references uh, more or less a parable of three brothers, and it's one that kind of follows the path that you and I took. That was just the nose of the grindstone approach. You know, you just do your job as quick as possible to try and reach that magic number and then be done, right? And then you've got, I would say, somebody else that takes a slightly slower approach, but kind of they're enjoying the ride, you know, more along the way. And then you've really got that last example of, hey, I've loved every single minute of it, and I don't care if I ever retire, right? Is there's nothing really stopping you from door dashing until till you're done with this world. But you know, like to say that, like I go back to maybe even like a Mr. Money Mustache article from forever ago, is it's actually really a superpower if you can live on less money than everyone else, right? Because every little bit that you squirrel away is is actually that much more that you can really live off of for a longer period of time because your expenses are just so much lower. And so if you can build that any amount of wealth with that lower expense rate, then you're way better off. And so given the time horizon in which Caleb really has before he wants to be done per se, is even if he was saving some small amount, as long as you're actually investing that, like that's very, very powerful. Is the rule of 72 that virtually every 8 or 9 years your money's going to double.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I've kind of witnessed how far they have been able to stretch money. He could take $1,000 and probably make it last for several months at this point because of his lifestyle is so inexpensive. He essentially, in a lot of cases, they're living very, very their housing expenses very, very minimal. I think in this situation at the park that they're working for, it's essentially like they're covering, the whatever it's the parking, the campsite like fee, the utilities, like all of that stuff is included in being a employee of the campground or whatever the place is, and that's kind of what they've chosen to look for, so that they can keep those costs way down, and then they've learned to make a lot of their own food, and they've become very resourceful. Again, some of these things that I didn't necessarily have at their age, and so to your point about how they could, if you can live on $400 or $500 a month and and make slightly more than that, or hopefully way more than that, and save a portion of that. Yeah, I mean, you could. One thing that I know that they are looking to do in the future is to work for 6 or 7 months and then not necessarily have to worry about working for the other half of the year, and then just repeat it in the next season. And that's something that seems like it could be sustainable for a long time. And I actually met some guys, just a quick side note tangent here. I met some guys a couple of years ago whenever we were in Oregon, and this guy was older than me, and he's out doing trail repair on a mountain, and he had a group of younger people with him, and we got to talking to him, and he was talking about how he and his wife travel all over the country, and they pick up these kind of jobs and will work just to essentially make enough money to provide for their lifestyle. And they they couldn't they couldn't have seemed happier. They just loved being able to be outside and do that kind of work and have a job that would last them 6 weeks or whatever, and they were moving on to the next place. And I mean, not necessarily for me, but I mean, you know, it's a pretty good lifestyle if you want to live that way. And I guess all this to say, you don't necessarily have to follow the traditional path, but I think, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I'm a bit of an optimist, I feel like, And if somebody were to be starting out right now from zero, I still feel like if they were in the traditional path of like went to college, or maybe they didn't go to college, but they have a full-time job, if they could live below their means, save, and like you said, and more importantly, invest, I think this is still repeatable to get to a financial independence spot by the time you're, maybe 15 years later. Would you agree with that? Do you think we're still in that kind of state with our doom and gloom economy and all the bad things that are happening in the world?
Yes. Is the very short answer. I am also, I don't know if I call myself an optimist or a realist, but I mean I think that, yeah, I mean I have a long-term belief that the market goes up and to the right. And no matter what it's doing in the middle, it's still going to land over there. Like, I mean, you look at our economy right now is by like if you pay attention to the headlines, you would think that it's going nothing but down. But I mean, go go Google year to date of, S&P 500 or VTI or anything else. Like it tells you a very different story. And so I would hesitate if you're somebody that just sits there and listens to social media or the news or the newspaper, etc., to try and say, or even, something that's pretty real to everybody is go to the gas pump or go to your grocery store and see, yeah, prices are increasing, but you see what the market's doing, and the market is very, very rosy. So, yeah, I get that these two messages are not jiving. Is like, okay, why are these prices over here increasing, yet the return of the market is highest it's ever been? But for the people that are invested in the market, it's a very rosy picture.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, whenever we were talking, you asked me if I'd been paying attention to the S&P, and I had said, yeah, I pretty much look at it every day. All I do is I open Google and I just put in there, S&P 500, and it pulls up to like today's chart. And I usually will look at like today it was relatively flat, but I'll kind of scroll down past the chart itself and I'll glance at the headlines for, like, in this case today, what's popping up under news is CNBC, Investopedia, Yahoo Finance, Market Watch. So I'll kind of glance at those headlines just to see if there's something, if we're going up or going down. Usually like the headline will say why. And it's funny that here lately I've been seeing a lot of headlines where they're like, so and so, market predictor is saying that the S&P will hit 8,000 by the end of the year, or they'll say, 8,200 by the end of the year. And I remember just a couple of months ago, because we were in that downward trend, that there was very similar headlines where there was somebody that was saying the S&P might bottom out at 6,000 by the end of the year. It was like the complete opposite. So it's just all that stuff is just garbage, and it's not even worth looking at. But on the day, like the intraday trading, I'm always curious, like, did somebody say something that's gonna cause the market to go one way or the other? And it's just like, because a lot of it's emotional at that,
Sure.
on the intraday trading.
I mean, and what I would say to that is it's all noise, right? Is if that's how you trade, you're not investing, you're speculating. And you're gambling at the end of the day. And so, I mean, I think us within the FI world is just say we've got a long time horizon, and that's what we plan for. Is this isn't a get rich quick scheme. If that's more your speed, sports gambling and crypto are calling your name. But like, I don't think that that is your path to long term wealth by and large.
It's funny you say sports gambling and crypto, because for our last conversation that was prior to you giving the Fi 201 talk, I was trying to come up with a title for that episode, and I called it Fi 201, Crypto and Gambling.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, with a side of investment newsletters, I've got one that I'll sell you, right? Shout out to Alan. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't think I had anything else to add to this conversation, but it was fun to kind of bounce these ideas off of you. And as always, appreciate your perspective.
yeah. No, and I don't know if Caleb listens to these, but you should tell him. Sounds like he's living a pretty stellar life and tuck away a few dollars for that rainy day, but otherwise, if you invest them, you will do quite great.
Yes, I completely agree. And I will share this episode with him. I know I'm pretty sure that he knows that we do this, but I'm not sure that he's listened to too many of these episodes.
All right. I'll talk to you on the next one, Josh.
Sounds good. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks.